And it's 4 o'clock, and I'm doing the best I can here. I'm here alone today. I don't have an assistant. Somebody had to save a baby last night, and so somebody has to stay home. I'm David Esrati. I'm running for Congress. If anybody's out there watching, tell me that you can hear me because I have no way of monitoring my own audio. And just to let you know what's going on, I'm running for Congress in Ohio 10, which is all of Montgomery County, part of Clark County, and all of Greene County. My opponent is Mike Turner, who's been a 10-term Republican, and he has no interest in hearing or talking to any of you. So, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about nonprofits, more specifically, my nonprofits, and that's not any good. Let's see if we can focus that in and zoom it back a bit. Sorry. Anyway, my nonprofits. I have two of them. One is called the Modern Policy Institute. One is called Reconstructing Dayton. One is a 501c3, that would be the Modern Policy Institute. And the other one is a 501c4. Many of you don't know the difference between those two, so I will explain briefly. A 501c3 is a true nonprofit. It is not political. It doesn't take any positions whatsoever. It is a policy body. A lot of churches are 501c3s, a lot of neighborhood organizations, and then again, there are huge nonprofits. Those are also 501c3s. It doesn't mean they can't pay their employees or, make a profit, but it means that basically the money is there for the common good. Now, a 501c4 is a little different. Up to 40% of its money can be spent on political lobbying, political positioning, backing candidates, the rest of that. 501c4s get involved in politics. So why would I have one of each? Well, I have to start with why did I get started with a 501c3 in the first place, or have this inclination. So let's go back, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I realized that it was pretty clear that the way we go about electing people isn't working really well. Why? We lack what's called a voter information system. A voter information system is a system to give voters clearly defined answers to many of the questions they have about who they're voting for. For instance, we can talk about what's the term of office, what are the job responsibilities of that person, how much does it pay, what do you have to do to get elected, how do you get removed, what are the requirements for the job. For instance, to be president, you have to be at least 35. To be a state congressman, you have to be at least 25. Things like that are kind of relevant, and people don't understand. Half the time I say I'm running for Congress, and they, at the State House? No. People get confused. We don't do a very good job of teaching civics in this country. In fact, if you went down the street and asked people, what does a precinct captain do? And who runs the Board of Elections? They would have no clue about either of those things. And I actually did a very long video talking about how to run for precinct captain and why it's important with Rob Scott, who is was the head of the Tea Party and later was Donald Trump's frontman. He's now the Kettering Clerk of Courts. So people don't understand all these things, and they have no place to go to find them out. They also have a hard time finding out, for the elected people, how they voted on things. Now, for Congress, it's pretty clear, except it's really a complex process. And the complex process is, to vote on something, there's all kinds of variations on that. The bill is one thing, and then there's addendums and everything else. But it's all recorded. The House does a pretty good job of publishing it. And then you have to go to other sites that will line up your candidate with how they voted on all kinds of things and which ones of those were important. Because they vote on a lot of things. Procedural things, things that never go anywhere. and it's hard to keep track of all this. And thanks, Bill. Thanks for telling me I'm on. That helps. So I wanted to have a system that helped voters know who and what they were voting for, because basically you can find out more about what's in the contents of your breakfast cereal than you can find out about most candidates. You know, they got the little box on the side. I meant to bring one up. And it tells you the nutritional value, how much protein, how many carbohydrates, how many sugars, each of the vitamins. All that stuff is listed. So it can be done. The question is, how do you break that down to make it simple to understand politicians and what they're made of? Now, we have several ways that voters are swayed. One is, quote, endorsement. Well, let's start off with the big one. One, they've separated themselves into either a D or an R, and they look for that on the ballot. Except it doesn't work for judges, although Ohio Supreme Court judges this election season will have Ds and Rs. That had to happen because, as my father used to say, if you had an Irish-sounding name starting with O, you'd win Cuyahoga County. So O'Hare, O'Connor, you know, I think that's why Obama won Ohio, but he didn't have the hyphen in there. But my father used to say we had two O'Connors running against each other and people couldn't tell which one was which. So people would look at D or R. And the second thing would be what they get sent and what they get handed as they walk in. A slate card, an endorsement on a slate card. And a slate card is basically a party's entire list of people they're backing. And it's looking more than likely that on the slate cards for Ohio 10 this year, I will not be included because the Montgomery County, the Greene County, and the Clark County people and the state people don't seem to think that I'm running against Mike Turner and apparently think he's just a shoo-in. I don't know why. I don't really care. The reality is when we had the election in May, I got more votes than 3 other candidates, and most of the people that are on, say, the Greene County Democratic Party Central Committee ran unopposed and didn't get that many votes and only filled about a third of their seats. So they're representing very few people and making decisions that aren't based on what the people decided. Because the people in the political party are not the political party. Sort of like the map is not the territory, which is what they used to teach us in Land Nav School. So you can look at the map, but make sure you look at your surroundings and see how things match up. I, for one, believe that there is a chance for every Democrat to beat every Republican just on the basis of Roe. I think there are an awful lot of really mad women who, Democrat or Republican, don't like their rights taken away from them. For some of them, their entire lives, they've been able to have access to an abortion. For them, that's an important issue. And women tend to vote more than men, especially when they're ticked off. So I don't know why the party is doing what they're doing, but endorsements are another thing, the slate cards, etc. There's also the League of Women Voters handout, which usually doesn't tell you anything about what's going on. They have you answer 2 questions, 50 words each, say your D or R, and here's a link to your website. They hold candidates events, but that aren't debates. So you have to answer their questions, and you can't ask the other candidate questions. I wonder what the Lincoln Douglas debate would have been like had they been running it. Anyway, so back to my nonprofit. Again, people have no clue on what all the candidates' positions are. And that is scary because you might end up voting for somebody who you thought was one thing and really doesn't agree with you as another. And I had this idea, and it sounds far-fetched, and I'm going to tell you straight out, it came from the technology used for the dating site OkCupid, which is a lot different than a lot of these other sites, or at least it was back in the day. Originally, it was some Harvard students, just like what started Facebook, had this idea of starting a market research firm And they figured they would get the best answers from people if they were telling the truth because they were looking to meet their mate. Sneaky way of getting in. So you would answer questions, your potential mate would answer questions, and then you'd say how important the answer to this question was. That's a very important thing. So it's good that we know the question is, which is bigger, the Earth or the sun? Now, if you know anything about science, if you paid attention at all through your school, you know the sun is much bigger than the Earth. So people would answer this question. Guy would answer it, a girl would answer it. Now, how important is this question's answer to you? Well, if you're a scientist, it's probably pretty damn important. But for some people, it might not be important at all. They might find things that are much more important than the size of the sun and the Earth. So then you rate how important is this question for my match. It's very important. It's somewhat important. It's not important at all. And this would give you a match percentage. And if you answer enough of these questions and you put the percentages in, what's important, what's not important, and you add it all up, you start to get a pretty good feel of, hey, this person lines up with me. So my idea was we will have sort of a test that the candidate takes and the voters take. And you can answer or not answer as many questions as you want. I would say the candidates would have to answer at least 100 to be on the ballot and to be included. And they should be the 100 top questions out of the bank that the voters have asked in their district. So you would get a match percentage on your candidate. And you also get to write a description of why you think this is important. That's kind of different. A little more information, fill in the blanks. So one of the questions might be, would you ever date somebody who has a gun in the house? Right? That's a question, an actual question. And there are people that would say no. But does this mean they just ruled out every FBI agent, every police officer? Does this mean they just ruled out everybody who is a... I had a really good example there, and I just lost it. Would that rule out anybody who... police officer, FBI, let's just stick with that. So they would say, no, I'd never date somebody like that. And the guy says, well, sorry, I'm a cop. I have to have a gun in the house. It will be secured, etc., etc. So the questions like that can be tricky. Or when you get to how important is politics to you? Or would you consider dating somebody who's unvaccinated? Or would you date somebody who has a sexually transmitted disease? These questions really can get to the heart of the matter really fast. And so we could ask questions like, do you believe abortion should be legal? And right there you split your candidate pool right down the middle, because some of them are going to say it's very important to me that no, and others will say yes. Some will say it's okay with rape and incest. Yeah, so we have to get these things in a way that people can see it. And for the presidential candidates, there's a site that later did this, and I think it's called I Stand With. And my idea was to have it at every level, and in fact have this system built by the government, provided for the people and for the candidates. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't just the basic. That was the first step. The second part of it was to provide a system for running meetings. So generate your agendas, cover your votes, record how everybody voted so it goes along with your record, and then people can sort out those votes to which questions they line up with, what issues. And the great thing about the OkCupid site was you could write your own questions and submit them into the bank originally. So we take all this information and we put it out there and we build this infrastructure. We build the infrastructure to run meetings properly and make them public and transparent and clear. And we're starting to get somewhere. But we haven't solved the problem yet. The problem, and this is also part of it, is you also need to see who's backing people, where the money's coming from. And right now, while we have voter registration systems, we have no donor registration systems. And the candidates self-report their donations. And that, my friends, is a mistake. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I've talked about this several times. When you have donor registration systems, we know exactly who donated. And there's no confusion between Stephen with a V, Stephen with a PH, and Steve, one living in Connecticut, one working in New York, who owns the New York Mets, who's worth several $billions. That's the current state of the FEC database. It's not good, it's not clean data, it's not clear. So we would know, for instance, if Stephen A. Cohen gave money to a New York assemblyman and then was asking for money to build a new stadium from the public, and we would know if that assemblyman had gotten a large donation. So that's step one of the the donor information system, and it would be in real time. And we would also, it would be delivered directly, so all limits would be managed and everything else, and we'd know exactly where it came from. But then the candidates would also be able to take their debit card that's given to them, and every expense they pay would then show up on their account as they do it. So we know where your candidates are spending money and what they're doing. Now I see official Lil Silver. Do I support ending Citizens United? Absolutely. Citizens United is absolute bunk. It needs to be overturned. We need to stop allowing corporations to buy our candidates and our Congress and everybody else. So the Modern Policy Institute was to build these frameworks and these software systems and the concept and a way to take it to the public and explain it and give this software away. But the next step on that, and this is the part that really gets me excited, is by adding in the factor of ranked choice voting. And I shouldn't have to explain ranked choice voting to you, but basically it says instead of being presented with either or, ketchup or mustard, you get the whole thing from mayo and ranch to hot sauce to everything in between. Barbecue sauce, you get all the flavors of political candidates, and you never feel as if your vote is going to be thrown away. Because what you will do is you will rank, this is my first choice, my second choice, my third choice, my fourth choice. And when the ballots are all in and they total them up, if your first choice does not get enough votes, okay, your vote rolls to the second person. If that person does not get enough votes, it rolls to the third person. Until we get somebody that a majority of people agree would be the best candidate. And to do this, you really need to be able to research all the candidates, because there will be more than two, and figure out how your ranking goes. So, I've heard some people say, oh, they don't even like ranked choice voting and gerrymandering screws things up, but ranked choice voting would still work even if we went to this system, which is you have no geographic boundaries. Ohio has 15 congressional seats. It has 150 people running. You start ranking your top choices, and you go your top 15, and ranked choice kicks in until you have elected one person that gets a majority and represents you, and then another group gets another until they've run out of candidates. Simple solution. So along those lines, we could also say by building this system, we can provide each candidate with a website. They don't have to go and buy it from somebody else or build it themselves. They put in their picture, they put in their position, their general bio, their information. They've answered enough questions on the survey that you know where they stand. They can make a video to talk about themselves, and all the information is there. Now, suppose that was all in place, and you could, as a voter, once you complete your survey and match up with these people, you could say which campaigns you want to hear from on a regular basis, not to hit you up for money constantly like they do now, but to find out what they're thinking about current events and how they stand on issues, and how to talk to your friends about voting for the candidate. Eliminating all of the crap we have with short commercials on TV. And of course, November's key time for retailers, and they don't want to be competing with 20 ads from Tim Ryan every hour versus 20 ads for JD Vance and whoever else has more money than God running. We spent $15 billion. $15 billion on the last national election cycle. That's not including all the down market ones. That's an insane amount of money, folks. We could do a lot of good with that. So that was the Modern Policy Institute. Reconstructing Dayton, the 501c4, is a totally different organization in that, yeah, we'd like to implement all the tools of the Modern Policy Institute. We'd love to introduce ranked choice voting and all the things that go along with it, and the voter information system. But what we're interested in is doing what has been failed already. We want to bring some sort of unified government to Montgomery County. There is no need for 18 police chiefs, 14 school districts, 7 or 9 parks and rec directors, metro parks, how many mayors we have, how many council people, all these things. There are other states like North Carolina and Florida that have countywide government, and it works so much better at such a lower overhead. We are literally supporting so much governmental overhead and duplication. Just think of all the websites for every single one of these jurisdictions, the 30 that are in Montgomery County alone, and how much it costs to put those up and keep them going and sort through everything. That's one side of it. The other side is it's almost impossible now for the limited number of journalists to actually keep an eye on things and keep you informed well enough to understand what's being done with your tax dollars and who is helping you out and who's screwing you over. So the problem with the last effort, which was called One Dayton, was that they made an entire plan and pushed it down people's throats. They set up the districts, they set up how it was going to be, and they said, this is what we need to do. Those 30 different jurisdictions, which each has their own little banana republic, those people were like, but I'll lose my job. I can't do that. And they fought it tooth and nail. Because that's the wrong approach in sales. You don't tell somebody this is what you have to have. You make them want to have it. So we were going to prove from the other direction why we're spending too much on local government and how we're not getting our money's worth. And it's really hard to keep track of who's working for us and who's screwing us over. So in order to do that, we became a 501c4, so we could actually endorse candidates who would agree with our agenda, who would be working towards unifying these things and creating, say, one county police department run by an elected chief, the sheriff, as opposed to having each city have its own and then have the sheriff and have all this confusion. I mean, just from the fact of we've got police departments that have to communicate to each other differently, we had a huge problem even instituting countywide 911, something that should be very simple. So we had a plan to do that, and we decided to get started on it, and there's some interesting videos there. But some of the things that, how this affects you is, why should your property taxes go up and down based on what your neighbor's properties do? Why should your biggest investment not be based on the investment you made? And why shouldn't you profit by that as long as you live in it? We made a video about that. All these new taxes and everything that we're doing, and it gets really complicated. And we could simplify it. So I urge you to go to reconstructingdayton.org and poke around a bit, and go to the Modern Policy modernpolicy.org and poke around a bit as well. But these have been in existence for, as nonprofits. The 501c3 just came through at the beginning of this year. The 501c4 we'd had for about 2 years. And I funded this with the proceeds from the settlement from my library lawsuit, which you can look up. And we are right now more engaged in trying to get me elected than move things forward on those. But it shows the kind of dedication that I have to public service and the interest I have in running things better for you. Making sure your government is responsible, responsive, transparent, accountable. These are the values that I am willing to put my money where my mouth is. It's not just my citizen reporting, but it's my efforts to make the tools that will make it better for all of us. I don't see any other questions from anybody, and I really appreciate those of you who sat through this. It's good to see a few comments, friendly faces. I know there's other people that aren't logged into their Gmail account, and I don't know how this works, that I see how many viewers we have. But I had to do this all myself. This is a little different than normal. I really appreciate you bearing with me and not hacking things away. There are some events posted on my website. If you go to electisright.com, you'll see some events posted that I will be at. Feel free to check those out. If you go and you want to make a donation, feel free. You can go to Esrati.com as well and read some information about some of the things I proposed in the past, because all these things started out long before. And you can thank the TEDx committee for not allowing me to speak there, because that forced me to start writing the book that's stuck at 25,000 words about the whole system that the Modern Policy Institute is about to start. Is there to work on. Anyway, really appreciate you, and we'll see you on Monday. Same time, same place, and I hope I know how to get out of this. So, have a good weekend, folks. Thanks.